My grandson texted me, "Don't come home, Grandma. They changed the locks." I stood there in shock. They thought I was just a helpless old woman. So I made one call to my lawyer, and the next morning police cars pulled up to MY House while my son and his family were being escorted out in handcuffs. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The key did not turn. I stood on my own front porch, 2 grocery bags heavy in my arms, and stared at the lock. It was a dull brass, new and unscratched. I tried again, pushing the key in fully, jiggling it the way Harold used to when the old lock stuck. Nothing. The mechanism was solid and unyielding. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I set the bags down on the welcome mat, the one Jamal gave me last Christmas that said Grandma's house. I examined the key in my palm. It was the correct one, the one I had used for 43 years. The deadbolt above the handle was also new. I had left the house 3 hours earlier to run errands. I had locked the old lock myself. My phone chimed in my purse. I retrieved it, my movements slow. A text message from Jamal glowed on the screen. "Don't come home, Grandma. They changed the locks." The words did not make sense at first. I read them 3 times. They changed. The cold knot tightened, spreading through my chest. I looked up from the phone and through the narrow window beside the front door. The living room curtain was pulled back a few inches. Lisa's face was there, watching me. She did not duck away. She met my gaze, and her lips curved into a small, sharp smile. Then she let the curtain fall back into place. I stood perfectly still. The afternoon sun was warm on my neck. A lawnmower droned somewhere down the street. The normalcy of the sound was a profound insult. My heart beat a hard, dull rhythm against my ribs. This was my house. The deed was in a fireproof box upstairs, with my name and Harold's name on it. The mortgage was paid in full in 1998. Every shrub, every floorboard, every memory in this place belonged to me. Betrayal is not a lightning strike. It is a slow, sinking cold like falling through ice. First comes the shock of the plunge, the gasp. Then the numbness sets in as the truth saturates you. My son was inside my house. His wife had just smiled at me through the glass. They had planned this. They had waited for me to leave, and then they had taken my home. I did not knock. I did not call out. I did not pound on the door or shout my son's name. To do so would be to play the role they had assigned me, the confused, helpless old woman easily ignored. Rage was there, a black, rising tide, but I would not let it control me. I forced it down, channeling it into a clear, cold thought. This is illegal. I picked up my grocery bags. I turned my back on my own front door. I walked down the 3 porch steps, my posture straight, my head high. I walked across the lawn to the sidewalk. I did not look back. I walked to Mrs. Henderson's house next door. She was in her garden, kneeling on a pad, pulling weeds. She looked up as I approached. "Afternoon, Evelyn. Everything all right?" "No, Jean," I said, and my voice was steady, which surprised me. "My son has changed the locks on my house. I am locked out." Her gloved hands stilled. Her eyes widened. "What? That can't be. Did you call the police?" "Not yet," I said. "I need to use your phone. Mine may. I may need to conserve the battery." She scrambled to her feet, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Of course, come inside. Good Lord." I followed her into her kitchen, which smelled of lemon cleaner and coffee. She pointed to the landline phone on the wall. I set my groceries on her table. My hands were steady as I pulled my small address book from my purse. I found the number for the Willow Inn, a quiet hotel downtown where Harold and I had stayed once during a pipe burst. I called and booked a room for 1 week, paying with my credit card. Then I found the business card attorney Regina Pierce had given me at a community legal seminar for seniors 2 years prior. I had filed it away, thinking I would never need it. I dialed the number. A receptionist answered, "Pierce and Associates." "My name is Evelyn Johnson. I need to speak with Attorney Pierce immediately. It is an urgent matter concerning an illegal eviction and elder financial abuse." There was a brief pause. "One moment, Mrs. Johnson." The hold music was classical, Vivaldi. I watched a hummingbird dart to Jean's feeder outside the window. Its wings were a frantic blur. "Evelyn Johnson." The voice on the line was smooth, firm, and alert. Regina Pierce, tell me what happened. I told her. I stated the facts in order without emotion. I left my house. I returned. The locks were changed. My son and daughter-in-law are inside. My grandson texted a warning. I have the deed. The house is mine, free and clear. Where are you right now? She asked. At a neighbor's house. Are you safe? I am. Good, listen carefully. Do not attempt to re-enter the property. Do not engage with them. That is their game, and we will not play it. Go to a hotel or to a friend's home. Do you have your deed, your ID, your tax records? The deed is in the house. My identification and a copy of last year's property tax bill are in my purse. Bring everything you have. Can you be at my office at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning? I can. I will have my assistant send you the address. We will file an emergency motion for a writ of possession and a temporary restraining order. What they have done is a civil and criminal act, Evelyn. We will fix this. Her certainty was a solid thing, a rope thrown into cold water. I took hold of it. Thank you. Get some rest. Gather your documents. I will see you tomorrow. And Evelyn. Yes. You are the homeowner. Remember that. Everything else is noise. I hung up the phone. Jean was staring at me, her face a mixture of horror and admiration. You're suing your own son. I am reclaiming my property, I said. The words felt foreign and powerful in my mouth. He is no longer acting as my son. I thanked her for the use of her phone. I picked up my groceries. I walked out to my car, which was parked at the curb in front of my own house. I did not look at the windows. I placed the bags in the trunk. I got into the driver's seat. I started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, I allowed myself one glance in the rearview mirror. The house looked the same as it always had. White siding, black shutters, the oak tree herald planted now towering over the roof. It was the shell of my life. And inside it, two people I no longer recognized were sitting in my living room, in my chairs, surrounded by my things. They believed they had won. They believed I would crumble. I turned the corner and drove toward the highway. The cold inside me had solidified into a core of polished stone. Heartbreak would come later in the quiet of a rented room. But for now, there was only the plan. The next step. The law. I was not a victim. I was a plaintiff, and I would see my son in court. The Willow Inn was quiet. The room was clean, impersonal, with beige walls and a landscape painting of a place I had never been. I placed my small suitcase on the luggage rack. I hung my good dress, the navy one, in the closet for the morning. I set my purse on the desk, taking out my folder of personal documents, my driver's license, my social security card, the copy of the property tax statement. I did not have the deed. That was a problem, but not an insurmountable one. I ordered a simple dinner from room service, soup and a sandwich. I ate it at the small table by the window, looking out at the parking lot. I did not turn on the television. The silence was heavy, but it was my silence. No one was arguing in the next room. No one was walking through my hallway with a sense of ownership they had not earned. I called Jean Henderson to let her know where I was and to thank her again. She offered to bring me a casserole. I declined politely. I needed to focus. That night, I slept in fits and starts. The mattress was too soft. The sounds of the ice machine down the hall were unfamiliar. Each time I woke, the reality of the situation settled over me again, cold and precise. My son had done this. My mind replayed the last few months. Marcus's increased visits, his questions about the house's value, about property taxes, about whether the stairs were getting too hard for me. Lisa's comments about how the neighborhood was changing, how a house this size was a lot for one person. I had heard concern. I had heard family worry. I now understood I had heard reconnaissance. At 7 the next morning, I was dressed and ready. I drank the in-room coffee. It was weak. I reviewed the papers in my folder one more time. At 8:30, I drove to the address Regina Pierce's assistant had emailed me. Her office was in a modern brick building downtown. The reception area was calm and professional. A young woman at the desk greeted me by name and led me immediately to a large corner office. The room was dominated by a wide mahogany desk. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with thick legal volumes. The other wall was windows, overlooking the city. Regina Pierce stood up as I entered. She was a tall woman dressed in a tailored gray suit. Her handshake was firm and brief. "Evelyn, please sit. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "No, thank you." I took the chair opposite her desk. She sat, folding her hands on the blotter. "Tell me everything again from the beginning. Leave nothing out, even if it seems small." I did. I recounted the events of the previous day. I detailed the past several months of comments from Marcus and Lisa. I told her about Jamal's text. I mentioned Lisa's face in the window. She listened without interruption, taking occasional notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she asked, "The deed is in the house. Where exactly?" "In a metal lockbox on the top shelf of the closet in the master bedroom. The key is on my key ring." I held up my keys, the one that no longer fit the front door dangling from the ring. "Good. The tax bill copy is excellent. Do you have your husband's will?" "A copy is in the same lockbox. The original is with the county probate court. He died 10 years ago. The house passed to me solely." She nodded. "We will get certified copies from the court. Now, the occupants. Your son, Marcus Johnson, and his wife, Lisa. Do they receive any mail at that address? Have they ever established residency there?" "No, they have their own apartment across town. They visit, but they do not live there. Their names are not on any utility bills. All mail comes to me." "Perfect." A small, hard smile touched her lips. It was not a friendly expression. It was the look of a craftsman who has been handed perfect tools. "What they have done is called a self-help eviction. It is illegal in this state. Changing the locks on a legal owner is trespassing. Given your age and their familial relationship, it also constitutes attempted elder financial abuse. The law takes a very dim view of this, Evelyn." She opened a folder on her desk and began outlining a strategy. Her words were clear and deliberate. "Today, we will file an emergency ex parte motion with the court for a writ of possession and a temporary restraining order. The ex parte part means we ask the judge to rule without them being present initially, due to the immediate harm being done. We will present your evidence of ownership. The judge will almost certainly grant it. Once granted, a sheriff's deputy will serve the order on Marcus and Lisa at the property. It will command them to vacate immediately and to cease all interference with your property." "What if they refuse?" I asked. "Then they will be removed by law enforcement and arrested for violating a court order. The TRO also prevents them from transferring, damaging, or removing any property from the home. We will request a follow-up hearing, usually within 14 days, where both parties can appear. At that hearing, we will seek a permanent order and press for criminal charges." She looked at me directly. "Our goal is to get you back into your home within 24 to 48 hours. The rest is legal consequence for them. Do you understand the steps?" "I understand." The plan was a ladder, each rung a specific action. It was logical, it was clean. "Your role is to remain calm. Do not contact them. Do not respond if they contact you unless it is through me. You are the wronged party, but in court, demeanor is everything. You will be polite, factual, and dignified. Can you do that?" "I have already started," I said. Her smile this time held a trace of warmth. "I can see that. Now we need to complete these forms." She slid a stack of papers toward me. "This is the petition and affidavit. You will need to sign, stating the facts are true under penalty of perjury." I read each page carefully. The language was dense, but the facts were my facts. I took the pen she offered and signed my name at the bottom of each document. The sound of the pen on paper was decisive. "My paralegal is filing these electronically right now," Regina said, gathering the signed papers. "We have a hearing set for 3 o'clock this afternoon in front of Judge Henderson. He is fair and has no patience for this sort of conduct." "So soon?" "The law moves quickly when the facts are clear and the harm is active," she said. "Go back to your hotel, rest, eat, be here at 2:15, wear that dress." She gestured to my navy dress. "It conveys respect for the court." I stood. The polished stone inside me felt heavier, more substantial. It was no longer just resolve. It was now a legal filing, a case number, a scheduled hearing. "Thank you, Attorney Pierce." "Regina, please." She walked me to the door. "This is what I do, Evelyn. We will get your home back." I drove back to the hotel. I did not feel like resting. I felt like a vessel being filled with a new, potent substance, knowledge. I was no longer just a grandmother wronged. I was Evelyn Johnson, petitioner. My enemy was not a stranger, but my own blood. And my weapon was not a shout, but a summons. The walls that mattered were not made of wood and plaster, but of paper and law. And mine, I was beginning to see, were far thicker than my son had ever imagined. The hotel room waited for me. It was a neutral space, a pause between acts. I had 2 hours before I needed to return to Regina's office. Time moved differently here, measured by the faint hum of the air conditioner and the distant sound of traffic. I sat in the armchair by the window. I did not turn on the television. The quiet was a container, and into it the past began to seep. I looked at my hands resting in my lap. On my left hand, my wedding band caught the light from the window. I had not taken it off in 45 years. I remembered the day Harold and I first saw the house. It was 1979. We were young, full of a nervous energy that felt like hope. The real estate agent, a man with a wide tie, had been skeptical. He showed us smaller houses, more modest properties. Harold had held my hand tightly. He asked to see the listing on Pine Street anyway. The front porch needed painting. The kitchen had avocado green appliances, but the living room was filled with morning sun and there was a massive oak tree in the backyard. Harold put his arm around my shoulders as we stood in that empty, echoing living room. "We can make this ours, Evie," he had said. His voice was quiet, sure. "This is it." I had nodded, my throat tight. It was more money than we had ever dreamed of spending. The mortgage papers felt like a cliff edge. We signed them anyway. A memory surfaced, sharp and clear. The week we moved in. We were painting the bedroom, the one that would become Marcus's nursery. Harold was rolling pale yellow paint onto the walls. I was cutting in around the window frame with a brush. The radio was playing an old Motown song. I had paint on my cheek. Harold leaned over and kissed it, then laughed at the smear it left on his lips. "Now we're both marked," he said. That room held the smell of fresh paint and our shared laughter for years. Another memory. Marcus, age 7, running a high fever. I had sat in that same bedroom, now blue, in a chair by his bed all night. I placed cool cloths on his forehead and read him stories until my voice was hoarse. Harold brought me cups of tea. The house was silent except for the sound of my reading and Marcus's labored breathing. By morning, the fever broke. He opened his eyes and asked for pancakes. The relief that filled the room was a physical presence. The house held every holiday. The smell of pine needles and cinnamon at Christmas. The crowded, noisy Thanksgiving tables where we extended the dining table with plywood and a tablecloth. Harold carving the turkey. Marcus, as a teenager, slouching in his chair, eager to leave until his friends arrived for dessert. The wallpaper in the dining room had a small, almost invisible stain from where a glass of red punch had tipped over one 4th of July. We never bothered to change it. It became part of the story. I remembered the silence after Harold's funeral. The house felt too large, a shell with the vital part missing. Friends and family had filled it with food and soft words, but then they left. I sat alone in the living room as night fell. The emptiness was a weight, but the house itself seemed to hold me up. His books were on the shelves. His tool bench was in the garage, a project half finished. The oak tree he planted cast a long shadow across the lawn. The house was not just a structure, it was my witness. It held the proof of our life, of my life. Now my son and his wife were inside those walls. Were they sitting on my sofa, using my kitchen? The thought was not just an invasion, it was a violation of a sacred archive. They were treating a library of memory as a vacant lot. I stood up from the chair. The movement was necessary. I could not sit still with these ghosts. I walked to the hotel room's small closet and touched the fabric of my navy dress, hanging ready for court. It was armor for the next battle. The memories fortified me, but they also clarified my purpose. This was not merely about a piece of property. It was about defending the entire narrative of my life, the love and labor embedded in every board and nail. My phone buzzed on the desk, a new email notification. It was from Regina's assistant, confirming the hearing time and the courtroom number. Attached was a copy of the filed petition. I opened it. Seeing my name as the plaintiff and Marcus and Lisa's names as the defendants in stark black and white on official court letterhead made the situation final in a new way. This was no longer a family disagreement. It was a matter of law. closed the email. I looked back out the window. The sun had moved higher in the sky. It was time to prepare. I went to the bathroom and washed my face with cool water. I looked at my reflection. The poised woman who looked back understood something. The love I felt for my family, for my home, was not a weakness. It was the source of my strength. The betrayal had attempted to turn that love into a vulnerability, a handle by which to grasp and control me. They had mistaken a deep root for a loose thread. I would go to court, I would state the facts, I would listen to the judge, and I would walk back into my home, not because I was angry, though anger was there, not for revenge, though consequence was required. I would do it for the couple who painted the nursery, for the mother who nursed her sick child, for the widow who learned to live with the silence, for the grandmother who deserved peace in her own home. The ghosts in the wallpaper were not specters of sadness. They were a chorus, and they were on my side. They reminded me of what I was and what I owned. Every memory was a title deed they could not contest. The hearing that afternoon was a formality. Judge Henderson, a man with tired eyes and a brisk manner, reviewed the petition and my affidavit. He asked me 2 questions to confirm I was the legal owner and that I had been locked out. I answered with a simple, "Yes, Your Honor." He did not ask for further elaboration. He signed the emergency writ of possession and the temporary restraining order. The entire proceeding took less than 10 minutes. Regina nodded to me as the judge's gavel came down. The law had spoken its first, decisive word. The enforcement of that word occurred at 5:17 p.m. I know the exact time because Jamal texted me a minute later. I was back in my hotel room, changing out of my court dress, when my phone vibrated. "Grandma, a man just came to the door with papers." Dad answered. "He's freaking out." I sat on the edge of the bed. I did not text back immediately. I needed to let the scene unfold without my interference. I pictured it, the image constructed from a lifetime of knowing my son. The doorbell would have rung. Marcus, believing himself the man of the house now, would have answered with an air of annoyed authority. He would have seen a stranger in a collared shirt holding a large envelope. "Marcus Johnson," the process server would have said. "Yeah, who's asking?" "Legal documents for you and Lisa Johnson. You have been served." The man would have held out the envelope. He would not have explained further. His job was delivery, not discussion. Marcus would have taken the envelope, his expression shifting from irritation to confusion. He would have fumbled it open, right there in the doorway. Lisa would have appeared behind him, her voice sharp. "What is it, Marcus? Who is that?" He would have started reading. I imagine his eyes scanning the first page. "In the circuit court for the county of Evelyn Johnson, petitioner versus Marcus Johnson and Lisa Johnson, RESPONDNTS, emergency motion for writ of possession and temporary restraining order." His face would have drained of color. The confident posture he had carried for the last 24 hours would have stiffened into shock. This is nonsense," he would have stammered, not to the server, who was already walking away, but to the empty air. Lisa would have snatched the papers from his hands. Her eyes, quick and calculating, would have darted across the legal language. She would have understood the headings faster than he did. "Writ of possession, restraining order, what does this mean?" "It means she's suing us." Marcus's voice would have been hollow. "She went to court, today." "She can't do that. This is her family. Call her right now, make her stop this." My phone would have rung then. It did not. He must have known on some level that a call would be useless. Or perhaps he was too stunned to act. The paper in his hands made their scheme tangible and ugly. It gave it a name, unlawful detainer. It listed potential penalties. Another text from Jamal came through. "Mom is yelling. Dad is just sitting at the kitchen table staring at the papers. They're talking about a lawyer. They sound scared." I typed a brief reply. "Thank you for telling me, Jamal. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I'm in my room. They forgot I was here." "Stay there. Do not engage." I sent the message. I felt a profound ache for my grandson, trapped in that house with the chaos his parents had created. I could imagine the conversation that followed. Lisa's voice, rising from confusion to panic to fury. "You said she wouldn't fight. You said she'd get upset and then give in. What is this, Marcus? What did you do?" What did I do? This was your idea. You said it was cleaner this way. I didn't tell you to get us served with a restraining order. It says we can't remove any property. My jewelry is in the guest room, my new handbag. Their argument would have spiraled, each accusation peeling back another layer of their fragile alliance. They were not partners in crime. They were accomplices turning on each other at the first sign of consequence. The house, which they had seen as a passive asset to be claimed, had become an active battleground, and they were now the trespassers under siege by a piece of paper. My phone buzzed again, but this time it was a call from Regina. "The service is confirmed," she said, her voice crisp with satisfaction. "The clock starts now. The writ gives them 24 hours to vacate voluntarily before the sheriff enforces it. The TRO is in immediate effect. If they so much as take a teaspoon out of that house, they are in violation." "They are arguing," I said. "Jamal is reporting from inside." "Good, let them argue. Uncertainty is our ally. They are realizing they are not dealing with a confused mother, but with the judicial system. It tends to focus the mind." "What happens tomorrow?" "We wait. If they are smart, they will pack their personal items and leave by the deadline. If they are not, the sheriff will remove them. In either case, Evelyn, you will be back in your home by this time tomorrow." I thanked her and ended the call. I looked at the blank television screen, seeing not my reflection but the image of my son at the kitchen table, his grand plan reduced to a stack of legal documents he could not comprehend. The arrogance had been a paper wall. The first real pressure had made it buckle. The law was not a suggestion, it was a structure, and I was learning to live inside it. The cold, clean feeling of the courtroom was preferable to the hot mess of their betrayal. I did not feel joy. I felt a grim validation. I had been right to fight. The proof was in their panic, served cold at their own door. The morning of the scheduled hearing dawned clear and cool. I put on the royal blue suit I had chosen for this purpose. The fabric was smooth, the cut classic. It felt like wearing a uniform of calm authority. Regina met me in the courthouse lobby. She looked me over and gave a single nod of approval. "Perfect. Remember, you are the homeowner. You are the victim of a crime. Let the facts speak. The judge will see the truth." We walked through the metal detectors and down a marble-floored hallway to courtroom 4B. The room was as I expected. High ceilings, wood paneling, the state seal behind the judge's bench. It smelled of lemon polish and old paper. A few people sat in the gallery, there for other matters. We took our seats at the plaintiff's table. I placed my hands flat on the cool wood surface to steady them. At exactly 9 o'clock, a side door opened and Judge Henderson entered. We all rose. He was the same judge from the emergency hearing, his face showing no recognition. "Be seated," he said, his voice echoing slightly. "Calling the case of Johnson versus Johnson. Appearances for the petitioner." Regina stood. "Regina Pierce for Evelyn Johnson, Your Honor." "And for the respondents." A young man I did not recognize stood up from the defense table. Marcus and Lisa sat beside him, dressed as if for a job interview. Marcus's tie was too tight. Lisa's face was set in a rigid mask of offended dignity. Their lawyer cleared his throat. "Brian Ackerman for Marcus and Lisa Johnson, Your Honor." "Very well," Judge Henderson said, putting on reading glasses. "This is a follow-up hearing on the emergency writ of possession and temporary restraining order granted yesterday. Ms. Pierce, proceed." Regina stood and walked to the lectern. She was composed, her voice carrying without effort. "Thank you, Your Honor. The facts are straightforward. Evelyn Johnson is the sole title holder of the property at 2147 Pine Street. She has lived there for 43 years. Her son and daughter-in-law, the respondents, do not live there. They have never lived there. 3 days ago, while Mrs. Johnson was out, the respondents changed the locks on the home, illegally locking her out in an attempted self-help eviction. They have refused her entry since. We have provided the court with certified copies of the deed, the probated will of Mrs. Johnson's late husband, and property tax records. We also have the affidavit of Mrs. Johnson attesting to these facts. The law on this is clear. The respondents are trespassers. We ask the court to make the writ of possession permanent and to uphold the temporary restraining order, and to award Mrs. Johnson any other relief the court deems just." She returned to her seat. The judge made a note. "Mr. Ackerman," Judge Henderson said, his tone neutral. The young lawyer stood. He adjusted his cuff. "Your Honor, my clients acknowledge there was a misunderstanding, but this is a family matter. Mrs. Johnson is of an age where the maintenance of such a large home is a concern. My clients were acting out of care and concern for her well-being. They were exploring options for her future care and perhaps a transfer of the property to better manage her affairs. The method may have been abrupt, but the intent was familial." I kept my eyes forward on the judge. I did not look at Marcus. Judge Henderson looked over his glasses at Ackerman. "Are you asserting a defense of incapacity or undue influence? Do you have medical evidence or a power of attorney to support the claim that Mrs. Johnson cannot manage her own affairs?" Ackerman shifted. "No, Your Honor, not at this time. We are merely stating the context." "The context is that two individuals with no legal interest in a property changed the locks to exclude the legal owner," the judge interrupted, his voice still calm but firmer. "That is not exploring options. That is an unlawful detainer. Do you have any legal argument against the petitioner's claim of title?" Marcus whispered something urgently to his lawyer. Ackerman's ears turned pink. "Your Honor, we would ask for time to resolve this within the family. A continuance to allow for mediation." Regina stood again. "Objection, Your Honor. The petitioner is currently homeless, residing in a hotel while the respondents occupy her home. Every day of delay is a day of continued harm. The law does not require a homeowner to mediate with trespassers." Judge Henderson nodded. "Sustained. Mr. Ackerman, your client's concern did not extend to ensuring Mrs. Johnson had a place to sleep. The law is indeed clear. I have reviewed the documents. The title is uncontested. The act of changing the locks is admitted in the respondent's own response. I find for the petitioner." He picked up his gavel. "The writ of possession is made permanent, effective immediately. The temporary restraining order is made a preliminary injunction, barring the respondents from any contact with the petitioner or her property. The respondents are ordered to vacate the premises by 5:00 p.m. today. Failure to do so will result in the sheriff removing them. The court will also refer this matter to the county prosecutor's office for consideration of criminal charges of unlawful eviction and elder financial abuse." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. It was over. The entire hearing had lasted 12 minutes. On my left, Regina let out a soft breath, a professional's sign of satisfaction. On my right, I heard a choked sound from Marcus. I allowed myself to look then. He was staring at the table, his shoulders slumped. Lisa was gripping his arm, her knuckles white, her mouth a thin line. Their lawyer was shuffling papers, his face grim. "Court is adjourned," the judge said and stood. We rose as he left. The formalities were complete. The law had done its job with efficient, dispassionate clarity. Regina touched my elbow. "Let's go. We have arrangements to make." As we turned to leave, Marcus took a step toward us. "Mother." A court bailiff moved slightly, intercepting him. The preliminary injunction was already in effect. He could not approach me. I met his eyes. I saw no remorse there yet, only shock and a dawning fear of the consequences. I did not speak. I had nothing to say to him in this place. I turned and walked out of the courtroom beside my attorney. In the hallway, the air felt different. The weight of the waiting was gone, replaced by the certainty of the outcome. "The sheriff's department will be notified of the order," Regina said. "I will call them to coordinate. If they are not out by 5, the sheriff will go in. I recommend you meet me at your property at 5:30. We will take back possession." "Thank you, Regina," I said. "You did perfectly," she replied. The judge saw exactly what he needed to see, a rightful owner and a pair of opportunists with no legal leg to stand on. Go back to the hotel. Rest. I will call you when it's time. I drove away from the courthouse. The sun was still high. I felt neither elation nor sorrow. I felt a profound sense of order restored. The scales, tipped so violently by my own blood, had been righted by the cool, impartial hand of the law. My home was no longer a contested space. It was, by judicial decree, mine again. The next step was physical reclamation. And I knew, as I saw the determined set of my own jaw in the rearview mirror, that I was ready for it. I did not go back to the hotel. I drove to a park a few blocks from my house and sat on a bench. I watched children play on the swings. I needed the normalcy, the reminder of a world where locks were not changed and sons did not betray their mothers. At 4:30, Regina called. "They're still there," she said. "The sheriff's deputy is on site. They have refused to comply with the order. More importantly, the deputy observed them carrying sealed boxes out to their car. That is a direct violation of the injunction against removing property. Are you ready?" "I am ready," I said. "I'll meet you at the corner of Pine and Maple in 10 minutes. I drove the short distance. A marked sheriff's SUV and an unmarked car were already parked a few houses down from mine. Regina's sedan pulled up behind me. She got out, a leather portfolio in her hand. A uniformed deputy and a plainclothes officer approached us. The deputy was a broad-shouldered woman with a serious face. The plainclothes officer showed a badge. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm Sergeant Miller. This is Deputy Alvarez. We have the court order." I nodded. "Thank you for being here." "Our understanding is the respondents are removing items, which violates the injunction," Regina stated, handing them a copy of the order. "That changes this from a simple eviction to an enforcement action." Sergeant Miller scanned the document. "Understood. Let's proceed." We walked as a group toward my house. My heart beat a steady, deliberate rhythm. I focused on the feel of the sidewalk under my shoes. Neighbors were on porches, in yards, watching. Curtains twitched. The street was silent except for our footsteps. We reached the front porch. The new brass lock gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Deputy Alvarez stepped forward and knocked firmly on the door. It opened after a moment. Marcus stood there. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He saw me, then the officers, then Regina. "Mother, what is this? We're leaving, we just need a little more time." "Time expired at 5 o'clock, sir," Deputy Alvarez said, her voice neutral. "We are here to execute a writ of possession. You are ordered to vacate immediately." Lisa appeared behind him, a jewelry box in her hands. She tried to slip it behind her back. "This is an outrage. We're family." Sergeant Miller's eyes went to the box. "Ma'am, are you removing items from the premises?" "These are my personal things." "The court order prohibits the removal of any property. You'll need to put that down. Step outside, please, both of you." "You can't be serious." Marcus's voice rose, cracking with panic. "Sir, step outside now, or you will be arrested for obstruction." The finality in the sergeant's voice broke through Marcus's bluster. He stepped onto the porch, his shoulders slumping. Lisa followed, placing the jewelry box on the porch swing with a defiant clatter. Her eyes burned with hatred, directed at me. I met her gaze without expression. Deputy Alvarez entered the house to ensure no one else was inside. She returned moments later with Jamal, who was carrying his school backpack. He looked from his parents to me, his face a mask of anguish and relief. "Grandma," he said softly. "It's okay, Jamal," I said. Sergeant Miller addressed Marcus and Lisa. "We have observed you violating the court order by attempting to remove property. You are both under arrest for violation of a court injunction." The words were procedural, devoid of malice. Lisa shrieked, "No, you can't do this. Marcus, do something." But Marcus was staring at the ground, defeated. Deputy Alvarez took Lisa's arm. "Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." The metallic click of the handcuffs was a small, sharp sound. It echoed in the quiet of the street. Lisa's protests turned into furious, impotent sobs. Marcus submitted silently, his head bowed, as the cuffs were secured on his wrists. I watched as the deputy guided them off my porch, toward the unmarked car. They were placed in the back seat. Jamal walked over to me. He was trembling. "I'm so sorry, Grandma, for all of it." "This is not your fault," I said. I put a hand on his shoulder. "You are the only one who showed me love in this. Go with your parents now. We will talk soon." He hugged me tightly, then turned and walked to the police car. He got into the front passenger seat, not looking back at the house. Sergeant Miller handed me a key. "The deputy has unlocked the door. The property is yours. We'll have a car in the area tonight. Do you need anything else? No, thank you. The officers left. The unmarked car pulled away, carrying my son, his wife, and my grandson. Regina stood beside me. The locksmith will be here in 20 minutes to rekey everything. I'll wait with you. I nodded. The street was emptying, neighbors retreating into their homes, the spectacle over. I looked at my front door, now open. The threshold awaited. I walked up the 3 steps. I crossed the porch. I stepped through the doorway into my foyer. The house was different. It smelled of their takeout food and a strange, sour anxiety. A lamp was knocked askew. There were vacuum marks on the carpet where they had moved furniture. It felt like a house after a party thrown by strangers. But it was silent. It was empty of them. The keys that didn't fit were gone. The new locks would soon be mine. I stood in the center of the living room, the same spot where Harold and I had once stood imagining our future. The victory was complete, and it was hollow, and it was absolutely necessary. I was home. The law had delivered me to my own doorstep. Now, the quiet work of reclaiming the silence could begin. The new key turned smoothly in the lock. I engaged the deadbolt, the sound a solid, final click. I was alone. The silence of the house was no longer an absence. It was a presence, waiting to be filled on my terms. I stood in the foyer and took inventory. The air held the faint, stale scent of fast food and tension. In the living room, the armchair had been pulled away from its usual corner, facing the television at an aggressive angle. A coffee cup sat on the windowsill, leaving a ring on the wood. These were small violations, but they were violations nonetheless. I walked to the window, picked up the cup, and carried it to the kitchen. The kitchen was worse. Dishes were piled in the sink. The counter was cluttered with bags and containers that were not mine. I opened the refrigerator. It was stocked with their groceries, expensive cheeses, bottled juices, gourmet mustard. My own half-empty milk carton had been pushed to the back. I took a large garbage bag from under the sink. I began clearing the counter, then the refrigerator. I did not save anything. Every item they had brought into my home went into the black plastic bag. I tied it shut and carried it to the porch. I filled a basin with hot, soapy water. I took a sponge and began to wash the counters. I scrubbed away the smudges and spills. I wiped down the refrigerator shelves, removing their items and restoring my own to their proper places. The physical action was methodical. With each swipe of the sponge, I erased a trace of their occupation. I moved back to the living room. I pushed the armchair back to its original position, aligning it precisely with the small table beside it. I vacuumed the carpet, erasing the tracks their movements had left. I dusted the surfaces, polishing the wood until it shone. I plumped the cushions on the sofa. Next, I went to the guest room where they had been staying. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled. 2 suitcases lay open on the floor, empty. The closet door was ajar. I stripped the bed, pulling off the sheets and pillowcases. I gathered them into a heap. I opened the closet. A few of Lisa's dresses hung there and a suit of Marcus. I took them off the hangers, folded them without ceremony, and placed them in a neat pile on the bare mattress. They could send for them later. As I was smoothing the fresh sheets onto the guest bed, my hand brushed against something under the pillow. I pulled it out. It was a folded piece of notebook paper, sealed with a piece of tape. My name was written on the outside in Jamal's careful script. I sat on the edge of the bed. I opened the note. Grandma asterisk. I don't know if you'll find this. I hope you do. I am so ashamed. I heard them planning it for weeks. They talked about how you were getting old and how the house was too much. Mom said it was practical. Dad kept saying you'd understand eventually. I tried to tell them it was wrong, but they wouldn't listen. They said I didn't understand how the world works. When you left to go to the store, I knew what they were going to do. I texted you as soon as the locksmith left. I'm sorry it wasn't sooner. I'm sorry I was too scared to say more. Watching them in court today, I've never been so disappointed in anyone. I love you. This is your house. I'm glad the judge saw that. Whatever happens, I'm on your side. Jamal. I read the note twice. The paper trembled slightly in my hand. The ache I felt was not sharp. It was a deep, weary sorrow for the innocence my grandson had lost, and a profound gratitude for the moral compass he had retained. He had chosen right over loyalty, truth over family. It was a harder choice than any I had faced in court. I folded the note and placed it in the pocket of my dress. I finished making the bed. The room was clean, neutral, ready for a guest who would be invited. The final room was my bedroom. The door was closed. I turned the knob and entered. It was exactly as I had left it 3 days ago. The bed was made. My perfume bottles were aligned on the dresser. The photograph of Harold on our wedding day was in its frame. They had not slept in here. Perhaps even they had understood that would be a line too far. I went to the closet and reached to the top shelf. The metal lockbox was there. I used my key and opened it. The deed, Harold's will, our marriage certificate, all were untouched. I closed the box and returned it to its place. The cleaning was done. The house was physically mine again. The silence, however, had changed. It was no longer the stunned quiet after a theft. It was the quiet of a space that has been meticulously put back in order. It was my silence. I went to the kitchen and made a cup of tea. I carried it to the living room. I did not turn on any lights. I sat in my armchair and watched the dusk gather through the window. The streetlights blinked on one by one. The victory was real. The law had worked. I was home. But the house felt large around me. The echoes of the day, the click of handcuffs, Jamal's hug, the slam of the police car door reverberated in the clean, empty rooms. I had won back my threshold, but the people I had crossed it to exclude were my own flesh and blood. The justice was cold and correct. The loneliness was a separate thing, a private cost. I sipped my tea. I listened to the quiet. This was the space I had fought for. Now, I had to learn how to live in it again. The morning after my return, I found a ceramic dish covered in aluminum foil on my front porch. A note was tucked underneath. "Welcome home, Evelyn. Thinking of you. Jean Henderson." It was a spinach quiche, still warm. I brought it inside. It was the first sign. The phone began to ring. First, it was Martha from my book club, her voice tight with concern. "Evelyn, I just heard. Are you all right? Do you need anything?" Then it was Pastor Lewis from the church, offering prayers and practical help. "The deacons can arrange meals if that would be helpful. We're here for you." Then it was Carol from down the street, and then Susan, who used to teach with me. I accepted the offers politely. I answered their questions with brief, factual statements. "Yes, I'm back in the house. Thank you for asking. The legal matters are proceeding." I did not elaborate. I did not need to. The story had spread through the neighborhood and the congregation with the swift, efficient precision of a community that knows how to protect its own. 2 days later, I needed groceries. I went to the local supermarket in the mid-morning. The store was quiet. I pushed my cart through the produce section, selecting apples and lettuce. I saw Lisa before she saw me. She was at the dairy case, her back to me. Her posture was rigid. A woman from my church, Deborah Mitchell, was also there, examining yogurts. As Lisa reached for a carton of milk, Deborah looked up. Their eyes met. Deborah's expression, normally warm and open, went flat and blank. She did not smile. She did not nod. She simply turned her cart and walked away, leaving the aisle entirely. Lisa's hand hovered in the air for a second before she grabbed the milk. She turned then and saw me. Her face flushed a deep mottled red. Her lips pressed together. For a moment I thought she might speak, might unleash some torrent of blame. But her eyes darted around the nearly empty aisle. She saw no allies. She saw only the possibility of more witnesses. She shoved the milk into her cart and pushed it in the opposite direction, her heels clicking a rapid, retreating rhythm on the linoleum. I continued my shopping. In the cereal aisle, Mrs. Gable, who lived 3 doors down from me, approached. She touched my arm gently. "I saw the police cars the other day, Evelyn. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. If you ever need a place to sit for a while, my door is always open." Her kindness was uncomplicated, a clear line drawn in the sand. At the checkout, the young cashier, a girl who had been in my library classes years ago, gave me a hesitant smile. "Hi, Mrs. Johnson, it's good to see you." As she bagged my items, she added quietly, "My mom said what happened. That's really messed up." The informal phrase, delivered with genuine indignation, was another piece of the consensus. The social machinery was in motion. It operated on glances, on withheld greetings, on the simple, powerful act of turning a cart away. It was not organized, it was organic. The community had rendered its verdict, and it was one of complete ostracization for Lisa and Marcus. I was the wronged party. They were the ones who had violated not just law, but a fundamental code of respect. Back at home, the doorbell rang. It was a delivery boy from a local florist, holding a bouquet of yellow roses. The card read, "For a strong woman, from your friends at Victory Baptist." I placed them in a vase on the dining table. That evening, Regina called. "I've had a message from Brian Ackerman, Marcus's lawyer," she said. "They are inquiring about the possibility of dropping the criminal referral from the judge in exchange for their immediate compliance with all civil orders. They are feeling the pressure." "What kind of pressure?" I asked. "Social, I imagine. Professional, potentially. I did some digging. Marcus's employer has a strict ethics clause. A criminal conviction, even for something like this, could be problematic. Lisa does volunteer work with the Junior League. This sort of scandal is their kryptonite. The arrest report is a public record." I understood. The law had provided the structure, but the community was applying the force. Their world was shrinking. The house they had tried to steal had become the reason they were being locked out of every other door. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "We hold the line. The criminal referral is a powerful lever. We don't have to decide anything yet. Let them sit with it. The prosecutor will contact us in a few days for our input. We can discuss options then." "Very well." I hung up and looked at the roses on the table. Their fragrance was sweet. The support was a blanket around my shoulders, but it did not warm the cold spot at the center, the place where my family had been. The neighborhood watch was in effect, but it was watching a crime scene that was also a home. The ripple of consequences was spreading, altering the landscape for Marcus and Lisa. For me, it meant casseroles and flowers and quiet solidarity. It meant I was not alone in this silence. The world had chosen a side, and I was on it. The isolation I had felt was being countered, piece by piece, by the tangible, practical love of my community. It was not the love I had expected from my son, but it was love nonetheless, and I would learn to accept it. The meeting with the prosecutor was brief. He was a weary-looking man in his 50s who referred to my case file with a practiced hand. "Mrs. Johnson, the state has a strong case for criminal unlawful eviction and attempted elder financial abuse. Your attorney informs me you may be considering a civil resolution. Is that correct?" I looked at Regina, who gave a slight nod. "That is correct," I said. "I am considering it." "The court would accept your wishes as the victim," he said. "But we would need a full, formal statement from the respondents admitting to the facts, and we would require some form of guaranteed behavioral change. A class, counseling, something on the record." "I understand." "Take your time. Let Ms. Pierce know your decision." A week later, I sat across from Regina in her office once more. The legal pad before her was covered in neat bullet points. "Their lawyer is negotiating from a position of desperation," she said. "Marcus is on administrative leave from his job pending resolution of personal legal matters. Lisa's social calendar is, as you witnessed, quite empty. They want the criminal threat gone." "What do they offer?" I asked. "Full written admission of guilt, notarized, acceptance of a permanent civil restraining order, agreement to pay all your legal fees, and they will complete a court-approved course on financial management and elder law." She leaned back. "It's a good deal for them. It keeps them out of jail and avoids a criminal record. For you, it gives you ultimate control. You are not forgiving them. You are imposing conditions. The admission of guilt is a weapon they will always carry. They will sign it, or they will face a trial." I considered this. The cold urge was to let the trial proceed, to see them branded publicly by the law they had scorned. But Jamal's note was in my pocket, a soft, persistent counterweight. A trial would drag him through the mud. A criminal record for his parents would follow him, too, and it would extend the conflict, tying my life to theirs in a long, bitter dance through the courts. "I have another condition," I said. Regina picked up her pen. "Name it." "I want to add Jamal's name to the deed. A transfer-on-death deed. The house will pass to him directly when I am gone. It will be documented and irrevocable. Marcus and Lisa are to be informed of this. They are to sign an acknowledgement that they have no present or future claim." A slow smile spread across Regina's face. It was the smile of a strategist who appreciates a masterstroke. That is poetic, Evelyn. It secures the legacy, rewards the righteous, and cuts them off at the knees. They will hate it, which is why it's perfect. Can it be done? Easily. I'll draft the paperwork today. The following afternoon, in the same conference room, I faced Marcus and Lisa again. They were accompanied by their chastened lawyer. They looked smaller. Marcus would not meet my eyes. Lisa's gaze was fixed on the table, her earlier defiance replaced by a sullen exhaustion. Regina laid out the terms. She read each one in a clear, uninflected voice. The admission of guilt, the restraining order, the payment of fees, the mandatory classes. Finally, she presented the transfer-on-death deed for Jamal. This is a non-negotiable condition of Mrs. Johnson's agreement to request the prosecutor drop criminal charges. Marcus's head snapped up. His eyes, bloodshot and wide, finally found mine. You're giving my son my inheritance. It was never your inheritance, I said, my voice level. It is my home. I am choosing its future steward. You disqualified yourself. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Lisa made a small, sharp noise like a deflating balloon. She understood the finality of it. This was not a temporary setback. This was a permanent rerouting of the future they had planned. Their lawyer placed a hand on Marcus's arm. Sign the documents, Marcus. This is the best possible outcome for you now. They signed. Marcus's signature was a shaky scrawl. Lisa's was an angry slash. I signed my name with the same steady hand I had used on the original petition. Regina notarized the admission of guilt. She handed me a copy. The words, "We, Marcus and Lisa Johnson, admit to knowingly and wrongfully changing the locks," were now a matter of permanent record. When it was done, their lawyer gathered his things and left with his clients, who did not look back. Regina let out a long breath. It's over. The prosecutor will file a dismissal. The civil orders are permanent. The house is yours and its future is secured. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. She opened it. Inside, on a bed of satin, was a single, newly cut silver key. A symbolic gesture, she said, for the new lock on your new beginning. I took the key. It was cool and solid. It weighed nothing, and yet it weighed everything. It was not a weapon. It was a tool. It would open my door, the one I had fought to keep. I closed my hand around it. Thank you, Regina, for everything. It was an honor, she said, and I believed her. I drove home. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows. I fitted the new silver key into my front door. It turned without resistance. I stepped inside into the clean, quiet space I had reclaimed. The legal war was concluded. I had chosen mercy, but it was mercy on my own terms, backed by the unassailable force of the law and a written confession. The victory was not sweet. It was sober and complete. I had defended my past and secured my legacy. The rest was silence, and it was mine. A month to the day after I turned the new key in the lock, I stood in my kitchen. The scent of roasting chicken, thyme, and baking cornbread filled the air. The dining table was extended with the old plywood board and covered with my best linen tablecloth. I placed settings for 10. Jamal arrived first. He let himself in with the key I had given him. Something smells amazing, Grandma, he said, placing a bakery box on the counter. Apple pie. Perfect, I said, wiping my hands on a towel. He looked older, the events of the past weeks having carved a new gravity into his expression. But his smile was genuine. How are you? I asked. Okay, he said. Better, Dad, started the financial counseling. It's quiet at home. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. We had an unspoken agreement to focus on the future we were building, not the past that had fractured. I'm glad you're here, I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. The doorbell rang. It was Jean Henderson and her husband, Tom, bearing a bottle of sparkling cider. Then came Martha from the book club and her wife, Anna. Pastor Lewis and his wife arrived, followed by Carol and her husband from down the street. Regina Pierce was the last to arrive, out of uniform, wearing a simple dress and carrying a bottle of wine. My house, which had echoed with such hostile silence and then such empty quiet, began to fill with voices, laughter, the clink of glasses being filled. I moved among my guests, directing people to seats, checking on the food. It was a familiar dance, one I had performed for decades, but now each step felt intentional, chosen. We gathered around the table. The dishes were passed: the golden brown chicken, the garlic mashed potatoes, the green beans with almonds, the warm cornbread. Plates were filled. Conversation flowed easily: talk of garden plans, a recent church play, a new book everyone was reading. No one mentioned locks or lawsuits or arrests. The shadow of what had happened was acknowledged only by its absence, by the deliberate, joyful normalcy that had replaced it. Pastor Lewis cleared his throat and raised his glass. "A toast," he said, the table quieted. "To Evelyn, to the strength of home, and to the family we choose to make within it. Welcome home." "Welcome home," everyone echoed, their glasses lifted toward me. I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the oven. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you all for being my family tonight." As the meal continued, Jamal, seated beside me, leaned over. "They're really happy for you, Grandma." "They are," I agreed, "and so am I." Later, as dessert was served and coffee poured, Regina found me refilling the water pitcher in the kitchen. "This is lovely, Evelyn. It feels right." "It does," I said. "It feels like my house again." "It is, unquestionably." She lowered her voice. "I heard from the prosecutor. The dismissal is filed. It's done." I nodded. The news settled inside me, a final piece clicking into place. There was no more pending threat, no lingering uncertainty. The law had done its work and now stepped back. The evening wound down slowly. Hugs were exchanged at the door. Promises to do it again soon were made. Jean insisted on helping with the first load of dishes. I let her, enjoying the companionable clatter in the kitchen. Finally, everyone was gone except Jamal. He helped me put away the last of the clean plates. The house was peacefully disordered: crumpled napkins, empty glasses, the lingering scent of food and friendship. "I should get going," Jamal said. "They'll be wondering where I am." I walked him to the door. "You have a key. You are always welcome here. This is your home too, not just someday, now." He hugged me. "I know, thank you, Grandma, for everything, for not giving up on me." "I could never," I whispered. I closed the door behind him. I did not lock it immediately. I walked through the quiet rooms. The dining table was still extended, a testament to the crowd it had held. I straightened a chair. I blew out the last candle. I went to the living room window and looked out at the dark street. A single porch light glowed at the Hendersons. The oak tree Harold planted was a tall silhouette against the night sky. I was alone, but I was not lonely. The solitude was a choice, a spaciousness I had fought for and won. The house held the echoes of the evening's laughter, just as it held the older echoes of my life with Harold, of raising a son, of decades of living. All of it belonged here. All of it was safe. I turned from the window. I walked to the front door and engaged the deadbolt. The sound was a solid, comforting conclusion. The revenge was complete, but it had never been the point. The point was this: the right to peace, the right to define my own family, the right to stand in my own kitchen and cook a meal for people who loved and respected me. I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to my bedroom. The door to the guest room was open, the bed ready for the next invited visitor. In my room, I prepared for bed with the same routines I had followed for years. The house settled around me, a familiar, protective shell. The war was over. The home had endured. And I, Evelyn Johnson, widow, grandmother, homeowner, was at its center, finally and forever at peace.